Well, today's topic is the cranial cavity and its content. So just remember the top part of inside of your head is known as the cranial cavity. It has two main sections. One is vault and other is the base. So the vault is the smooth uniform upper wall and the base is the uneven lower part with the three section that is known as fossa that holds the brain. Inside the cranial cavity there are three layers covering the brain and providing the protection. So these layers, they are known as meninges. So the brain is covered by bone of cranium, that is calvaria. The spinal cord, it is covered by cylindrical case of bone that is known as vertebral canals. Now the meninges, the outer layer is the dura mater. The middle one is arachnoid mater and the innermost is the pia mater. Remember the dura mater, it is the thickest among all these. So the dura mater, remember, it surrounds the special blood vessels that are known as venous sinuses. So it has the dura mater, it has its own blood supply and nerves. And the space that is present between the dura mater and the arachnoid mater, it's known as the subdural space. The arachnoid mater, it is separated from the innermost layer that is the pia mater and it is filled with fluid that is known as cerebrospinal fluid. In brain there are some specific folds. What are dural folds? Let us talk about them. The first is the falx cerebri. So this one is the falx cerebri. It is a large, remember, sickle shaped fold of the meningeal layer and it sits in the middle along the longitudinal fissure. So it sits in the middle longitudinal fissure between the two cerebral hemisphere. So remember it has a narrow front end that is attached to the bony ridge that is known as crista galli, and posteriorly the back end, it is attached to the upper end of another fold that is known as tentorium cerebelli. So it has a two margin, upper margin and lower margin. The upper margin, remember, it is, so this one is the falx cerebri, the upper margin is curved and attached to the sagittal sinus, whereas the lower margin, it is curved the other way and it is free. Now what are the structures that are enclosed in? One is the superior sagittal sinus. The structures that are enclosed in it are the superior sagittal sinus, inferior sagittal sinus and the straight sinus. So this one is the straight sinus. The next is the tentorium cerebelli. So this structure is the tentorium cerebelli. Remember, it is like a tent shaped structure and it is made up of layer that is known as the dura. So it acts as a roof for the back part of your head, that is also known as posterior cranial fossa. So this structure, it has important role. It separates the cerebellum from the occipital lobe of the cerebrum. Now it has two surfaces, superior surface and the inferior surface. The superior surface will give attachment to the falx cerebri in the median plane and the inferior surface is concave to fit the superior convex surface of the cerebellum. So it has two borders. One is attached border, this one is the attached border of the tentorium cerebelli and other is the free border. So the free margin, the front part of the tentorium cerebelli has a free margin that looks like a U shape. So end of U shaped, they are connected to the bony structure that is known as anterior clinoid processes. The attached surface, this one is the attached surface. It is attached to bone of your skull. It is curved and it connects to the occipital and the parietal bone. So this attached margin is where you find important blood channels that are known as transverse and superior petrosal sinus. Now what are the sinuses that are enclosed in it? One is the transverse sinus, second is a straight sinus, and other is a superior petrosal sinus. So transverse sinus, superior petrosal sinus, and the straight sinus. The cranial nerves that pulses it are the in front point of crossing of free and attached border. There are trochlear trigeminal nerves. The third is the falx cerebelli. So this one is the falx cerebelli. The third is the falx cerebelli. Remember, it is a sickle shaped portion of the dura mater. It points forward in space, that is known as posterior cerebellar notch. So the base of sickle, it is attached to the back part of the lower part of the tentorium cerebelli. The top part of the sickle is split into two parts extending toward the side of opening, that is the foramen magnum. So the back part of posterior margin is curved outward and attached to the internal occipital protuberance. So the sinuses enclosed here are the occipital sinuses. The next is the diaphragm celli. Remember, diaphragm celli, it is a small circular horizontal fold made up of dura mater. It is a protective layer around the brain, and it acts as a roof for specific areas that is known as hypophyseal fossa that covers the pituitary gland. So this one is the diaphragm celli. At front there is tuberculum celli. Posteriorly there is dorsum celli. There is a hole in the center of the diaphragm celli. Through this hole, the stalk of the hypophysis cerebri, that is the pituitary gland, passes. The fifth is the cavum trigeminal. It is reduplication of the inner layer of dura to form specific space that is occupied by the trigeminal ganglion. Now what is the nerve supply of dura? The dura of the anterior cranial fossa is supplied by anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerve. The dura of the middle cranial fossa is supplied by nervus spinosus branch of the mandibular nerve and the meningeal branch of the maxillary nerve. The dura of the posterior cranial fossa is supplied by meningeal branch of 9th, 10th and 12th cranial nerve. The dura around the foramen magnum, it is supplied by first and second cervical nerves. Coming to the arterial supply of dura, the dura in the anterior cranial fossa is supplied by anterior and posterior ethmoidal arteries, that is branch of ophthalmic artery. Dura in the middle cranial fossa is supplied by accessory and middle meningeal artery, that is branch of the maxillary artery, along with the recurrent branch of lacrimal nerve, that are the branches of along with the recurrent branch of the lacrimal artery, that are the branches of ophthalmic artery. The dura of the posterior cranial fossa is supplied by vertebral and the ascending pharyngeal arteries.